What's up, Raptors fans? Welcome to the Warriors Report. It's time to talk about Nick Nurse and whether or not he needs to trust the bench more. We have obviously seen the bench play a little bit more due to injuries to Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby as well. Nick Nurse has really had no option but to play some of the bench players a bit more, and we've seen them produce fairly well the last couple of games. So I'm going to break down in this video. I'm going to take an argument for both sides on whether or not Nick Nurse is correct for playing his starters heavy minutes, or whether he's wrong and he should give the bench a little bit more. And I'm going to give you my final verdict at the end of the video, and also give you a very interesting theory as to why I believe Nick Nurse is playing his starters heavy minutes. So if you're ready to watch this video, guys, make sure to hit the like button. If you want to hit the subscribe button, we're super close to 3,000 subscribers. That would be very much appreciated as well. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, as you know, I do like to give out shout outs on my channel, and for today's video, the shout out goes out to Team Lucid Gaming. So Team Lucid Gaming, thank you so much for supporting this channel to your likes and comments. It is very much appreciated. Now let's talk about that bench, which Nick Nurse has really not given a lot of minutes to. Now, you could argue for good reason, as the Raptors bench is ranked dead last in the league in producing only 24.4 points per game. And not only that, but you're also seeing the three-point shooting really struggle off of the bench as well. Now, you can question that is possibly due to the fact that we have had a lot of injuries, but also due to the fact that the Raptors bench, when you take a look at the minutes column, the Raptors bench is only playing 14 minutes a game, which isn't a lot. But again, you could contribute that to just them struggling and just not having any consistent play outside of Chris Boucher. Now, I say this because Malachi Flynn has been suffering off these limited minutes that he has given to the bench, and we have finally gotten to see Malachi Flynn really shine in Fred VanVleet's absence. So obviously Nick Nurse has had no choice but to play Malachi Flynn. Of course, we have very little to no depth behind Fred VanVleet in the point guard position, and he has been playing absolutely unbelievable the last couple games. Now, I know it is only 2 games, but in those 2 games, he's put up 16.5 points per game, 5 rebounds, 6.5 assists, and 50% from the three-point line, which is huge because the Raptors desperately need three-point shooting as of right now. Some of our best three-point shooters in Fred and OG are out as well. Obviously, we still do have Trent Jr., but he's been struggling a little bit as well, and his field goal percentage is very impressive for someone his size. 59% is amazing, and we know there's been questions surrounding Malachi Flynn from obviously Nick Nurse, and a lot of fans have bashed Malachi Flynn, saying we should trade him for anything. But anyone that has done any sort of scouting report prior to Malachi Flynn getting drafted by the Raptors would know that he's a very talented player who gives us a lot of very similar skill sets as you see in Fred VanVleet. Obviously, he's able to shoot the three-point ball. He's also able to hit those mid-range jumpers as well as attack the basket. Now, he may not be the most efficient player at finishing around the basket, but he still has a very quick first step to attack the basket, as we've seen in the last couple games. So I was a little bit sad to see Malachi Flynn not get enough minutes, and I will take a deeper dive into why Nick Nurse hasn't been playing some of these guys in just a moment. But I do want to touch on Precious Achiuwa as well, who has been playing really well since the All-Star game, really the Rising Stars game. He's been putting up some really impressive numbers, as you see there as well. His last 4 games. Now, we see Precious Achiuwa was in a different boat, that he does get consistent minutes from the Raptors head coach and Nick Nurse, but he's been putting up some nice numbers with 13.5 points, 7.2 rebounds. Obviously, his field goal and three-point percentage can definitely be bumped up a little bit as well, but he is a young player that's learning, and his confidence has just grown. So I think the big issue when we talk about Nick Nurse is the fact that the only issue I would say I have with Nick Nurse is the fact that Nick Nurse, we all know he's a very competitive coach. We all know he's that mad scientist, a Masai Ujiri, and a lot of us fans have labeled him as. But the issue I'm seeing with Nick Nurse is that he needs to realize this is not a championship or bust season. This isn't the first season where he inherited the Raptors and the expectations were different. Nick Nurse, I think he should play the guys a little bit more. Now, obviously, there's been some issues with Malachi Flynn that he clearly sees that we do not. Now, I will always say this, no matter how much I criticize our management or our head coach, there's a reason why I'm making YouTube videos and I'm not one of 30 people with an NBA head coach job. So Nick Nurse is obviously in a position where he sees the game a lot better than we do, but I think he just needs to give Malachi Flynn, would be a great example, just consistent minutes. I have seen this with Malachi Flynn and even some of the other bench pieces as well, where he will play them for 5, 6 minutes, and within even the first couple games, he notices one or two mistakes, and then we don't see Malachi Flynn for another 6, 7 games unless it's garbage time. So I think that's the only issue I would say I have with Nick Nurse is the fact that he really just yanks guys, and then you don't see him for several games down the stretch. I think giving young players like Malachi Flynn just consistent minutes. It doesn't have to be a lot. Just giving him 7, 8 minutes a game would be a huge confident booster, but just also to let him work through the mistakes. Now, I know there's a counter argument here that the coaches bench him for a reason. They don't want him to continuously make that mistake and really just fix those errors. But Nick Nurse, I feel like he does this a lot when you see him not call timeouts when the opposing team goes on runs. And the reason he does that is because he wants his players to learn through their mistakes and continue to play through that adversity, which is kind of, again, kind of contradicting itself what he does with some of the younger guys. But not only Malachi Flynn, we've also seen the mysterious case of Yuta Watanabe as well, who Nick Nurse has praised all season as being that one player that every team would love to have, who is a very hard player, hardworking player. But Yuta Watanabe, after he got COVID, we saw him for a couple games, and Yuta said his conditioning was not up to par, and we have not seen Yuta Watanabe much since those 2 games, and that was a very long time ago. So I'm just a little bit confused by Nick Nurse's rotations. Now, I know there was a lot of questions surrounding whether or not Nick Nurse is a coach that is capable of developing players. Now, this I feel really strongly about, and shout outs to James Welsh, who actually made a really brilliant comment in my last video. But when we talk about Nick Nurse and his inability, or as a lot of people think, he's not able to develop players, we need to talk about Chris Boucher, who was struggling early in the season, and he's done such a tremendous job of turning that around. And a lot of the times when we see players turning it around, we don't give enough credit to coaches and their staff of what they do with players behind the scenes, practices, but also the videos and the little breakdowns they go with each player we see. Now, Chris Boucher isn't the only one as well, because Gary Trent Jr. has come a long way from just 1 season ago. Now, I was personally not very happy with the fact that Goran Dragic was in the starting lineup to start the season, because I felt like Gary Trent Jr. should have been part, well, at least at that point, I thought he was part of our core, and I was just confused as to why he was coming off of the bench. But then we've seen the tremendous play of Gary Trent Jr., just how much he has turned it around. And not only that, but you need to realize that Nick Nurse has been part of the coaching staff well before he was even the head coach. He was responsible for the offensive schemes we've seen with Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan. Nick Nurse was the assistant coach with Dwayne Casey, so I think some credit needs to go to Nick Nurse as well. I absolutely understand that, you know what, there's been a little bit question surrounding his rotations and just how strict he is with his minutes when it comes to playing certain guys, but we do need to realize we need to give the credit where it's due. Gary Trent Jr. has come a long way from last season. His defense has improved tremendously, and not only Gary Trent Jr., but just some of the other guys as well. Like I've mentioned, he's been an assistant coach in the Raptors system well over before we even got to see him as our head coach. So some of the credit definitely needs to go there. And even guys like Terrence Davis, who unfortunately just, whatever happened with him there, but Terrence Davis was coming a long way as well. And Justin Champagnie has been improving as well. So I think we need to kind of stop that narrative that Nick Nurse isn't a great developmental coach. Again, it was a different scenario from where he had Dwayne Casey, where Dwayne Casey was coming into the Raptors. We were a team that was at the bottom of the East, and we needed development. Whereas Nick Nurse, when he got into the head coaching position for the Raptors, he was in a position where the Raptors were expected to go far into the playoffs and win the championship. So I think the roles are a little bit different, but I do think Nick Nurse does play his starters a lot of minutes. I would like to see the bench a little bit more. And like I said, I'll reference this to James Welsh, who made an absolute brilliant comment. Nick Nurse works through some of their mistakes, and he wants some of these younger guys to really fix their mistakes. And perhaps we can say Malachi Flynn is performing at a very high level because he's getting high minutes playing time. He's finally getting playing time. But we can also contribute that to Nick Nurse. Maybe his coaching staff has been working behind the scenes with Malachi Flynn, and that is the reason why we're seeing Malachi Flynn perform as well as he does. But I want to give you my one final verdict before I give you my final decision here. The one reason I believe that Nick Nurse is playing his starters such heavy minutes, when you take a look at the Raptors starting lineup, I think we can all agree these are our 5 main guys, and the Raptors roster, just the way it's constructed, is around these 5 players. Now, when you take a look at each individual player in Pascal, Fred, Scotty Barnes, OG Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr., each of these individual players needs their shots. And now when you're playing these guys 35 minutes, there's without a doubt that exhaustion comes into play. And I think this just allows some of these guys to get all of their shots together. When Fred VanVleet is playing such heavy minutes, he's not going to be taking more shots because, well, he's simply tired. So this just allows some of the other guys like Scotty Barnes and OG Anunoby just to kind of get it going a little bit more offensively, but just to look for their own offense as well. So that is personally my take on why I think Nick Nurse is playing the starters heavy minutes. And it was also a little bit due to the fact that I think it was a rebellious move to kind of let the management know that our bench isn't great. Am I suggesting that Nick Nurse needs to play the bench guys 15-20 minutes a game? Absolutely not. I think he's done a tremendous job with the Raptors, and he doesn't get enough credit for what he's done with the Raptors, despite all of the injuries and the constant rotations we've had of different rotations of, and again, this team isn't very deep. If we're being honest, the bench isn't that great outside of Chris Boucher. But I do believe, again, as I've touched upon, the point earlier I want to touch upon again is it's not a championship or bust season. Yes, the goal is to make the playoffs and win games, but I think even giving some guys 5 to 7 minutes a game just gives them that little bit of confident booster where they know they're going to be playing, and it just allows some of these younger players to work through their mistakes. I would like to see Justin Champagnie a little bit more. I would like to see Malachi Flynn a little bit more consistently, and obviously Chris Boucher has been getting his minutes, and Precious Achiuwa has been playing well. And if we do get a chance to see Yuta, that'd be great as well. He's an energy guy who brings in a lot of energy. So we do have some bench pieces. I know they're not the greatest, but I do want to hear from you guys. Do you guys agree with my take on Nick Nurse and how he should give the bench guys a little bit more playing time just to prevent the starters from getting injured as well? We're seeing it obviously with the OG and Fred right now, and hopefully we don't see this going into the playoffs. You obviously want your starters to be healthy, but I do want to hear from you guys on my take. And as always, guys, I do have a trivia question for you today. And the trivia question for today is, who is the tallest players the Raptors have drafted? Is it A, Jakob Poeltl? Is it B, Andrea Bargnani? Is it C, Jonas Valanciunas? Or is it D, and I apologize for mispronouncing this name, but is it Alexander Radojevic? Maybe you guys can tell me how to pronounce his name, but which of these players is the tallest players the Raptors have drafted? Whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. And as promised, guys, I will be taking a question from you guys in the comments section. And for today's video, the comment comes from Jurassic's Basketball, who is also an awesome YouTube content maker. He makes Raptors content as well as other NBA content as well. So definitely check him out. But his question was, do you think the Raptors should stick to the all-out small ball like they have, or shore up their roster versatility with a true 6'11", 7-foot center? Now, I've said this all season long. I think the Raptors would be wise to have a backup 6'11", 7-foot center just in case you need it for different matchups. But I understand why Masai Ujiri is doing that, because if you're adding a center that tall, it's, first of all, the market is very dry for a center that tall, unless you're talking about DeAndre Jordan, and DeAndre Jordan isn't providing offense. So you essentially sign a 7-foot center who's not going to be playing a lot, and also he's not providing a lot of bench scoring with the Raptors desperately need. So I think Masai Ujiri has a vision, and I think it's, although I may not agree with it, I think it's best to stick with that vision just for at least one season and see how well it goes into the playoffs, because you don't start a diet plan and quit 3 days into the diet plan because you don't see any results. So I think give Masai Ujiri and the management their vision and a chance to see how this vision goes of these obviously versatile defenders of 6'8", 6'9" guys, and see how it goes into the playoffs. Again, I don't necessarily agree with it, but we'll see how that happens. But I do want to hear from you guys regarding my thoughts on this video, and if you guys have any questions regarding the Raptors or basketball in general. I will pick a question from the comment section below and feature it and answer in my next video. So that will be it for today's video, guys. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.